Alright y'all, welcome back to Common Arms channel. Now if y'all aren't familiar with my YouTube channel, I'll start by saying that I spent 5 years in the Marine Corps Infantry and then I switched over to Army Infantry. And I've done things, conventional infantry, close quarter battle, and reconnaissance. So I've been all around the infantry. So as you can imagine, I'm pretty passionate about it. Now it's true that the Air Force, Navy, tanks, and all those support elements, it's true that they do allow the infantry to conduct their business. However, it is the infantry that goes and takes ground, provides aid wherever it's needed. It's really the infantry that wins those wars. And when you're in the infantry, you're putting so much at stake for potentially such a small percentage of the big piece of the full puzzle. You can have a battalion or a company or even down to a platoon all risking it for one specific area of one specific mission. So people don't necessarily think about the infantry in that regards, because they sort of just see infantry, they think of them as a grunts, the people who just do the dirty work, sort of like the cannon fodder. But in reality, infantry are very smart individuals. They can be specialized in a bunch of different things, and it's important to make sure that the infantry has the best gear that country can provide for them and that country can afford them. So in this video, I'm going to go over a list of what I think the infantry deserves more of. Now, obviously, countries will spend a lot of their defense budget on tanks and technology, and that's fine. But the infantry definitely deserves a lot of the limelight. It's definitely important to make sure that the infantry is set up as best as possible. So even when you have air superiority, you have naval superiority, if you don't have an infantry that's capable of going in and completing their mission, then it's not really going to go anywhere. Now, if you're infantry, whether it be Marines, Army, or what have you, or even infantry in a different country, then you might understand where I'm coming from when I say a lot of these things. So kicking off the list, the most important thing that people tend to overlook is their actual combat uniform. Now, back in the days when you had people in dress blues and red coats and all that whatnot, it's fine for them to wear that sort of stuff. But now war is so modular and so variable that you really need to think about the little things, because it's the little things that at the end of the day are going to provide you with that comfort and that sanity and that just mobility and flexibility to really utilize everything else that you have in your toolbox. So a combat top and a combat bottom. In the Marines, you tend to get issued these whenever you're going on deployment, and it's pretty much the same in the Army. The Army, it's called RFI, which you'll get this RFI issue, which is pretty much like slightly better stuff. It's still really not that good, but it's slightly better stuff that you'll use when you're on deployment. So when I got RFI, I got combat tops and I got combat pants, but it can definitely be better. So with combat tops and combat pants, the combat top is less restrictive. It's more comfortable. It obviously the top and bottom are flame retardant, so you don't have to worry about any of your clothes catching fire or melting to you. It really allows that flexibility and that breathability. It really allows you to wear your kit for an extended period of time because it's so comfortable and breathable, and because it's generally more streamlined. So you won't have unnecessary pockets here. You might have like a couple of pockets on the side. That's fine. That's maybe for like a panel for signaling. But all these pockets, all these like collars and whatnot, it gets rid of all of that. So your kit rests nicely on your chest. It can get as close as possible to you, and it sort of just streamlines everything. And with the combat pants as well, obviously you can get the knee pad inserts with those. And at the end of the day, people kind of overlook knee pads. People don't like to wear knee pads, but you're going to appreciate knee pads whenever you have to take knees on mountainous terrain, or even when you're inside of a building and you need to take a knee on concrete or something, or some hard surface. If you have those knee pads, you really start to take them for granted. But when you don't have those knee pads, you're going to realize real quick that you had wished you had knee pads. Now, the next thing is another big thing that I'm passionate about, especially coming from the Marines, is boot selection. So in the Marines, they're all about uniformity. They're all about having an image to certain things. So, you know, with your boots, you had to have the Eagle Globe and Anchor stamped on the side. And that's cool when you look at it, but when you actually put those boots on, you realize how horrible they are. You have companies like Belleville, Danner, and Bates, but if you talk to special forces or people who are used to operating in combat environments and what have you, they're not going to these brands. When you talk to them, they're talking about, you know, Merrill and Solomon, and you know, these boots that you don't even have access to. In the Marine Corps, you have access to, or you have the option of wearing, I think maybe like a handful of boots, a handful of manufacturers, and it has to have that stamp on it. In the Army, you have a way better selection. You can use Nike or Garmont. You have some Merrell options, Under Armour, but so they're all kind of the same thing. But you're still pretty limited because the regulation states that it needs to be a certain height, a certain material, and if it strays from that slightly, you can't wear it. Now, you do have people who wear Merrells and Solomons whenever they're on deployment, and you'll know if you had Merrells or Solomons and you use them on deployment or use them in training, it's far superior, especially when you need to do movements, because your feet will get very jacked up when you're wearing Danner and Bates and all the crap that you get at basic training and whatnot. So that's definitely something that I feel should be considered a little bit more from higher when you're talking about, you know, access to good footwear. Now, the next thing is very passionate for me, because coming from the Marines, we had our plate carriers, and when I was in the Marines, I thought, you know, they weren't really that good. I started off with the Interceptor body armor, and that was kind of like wearing a turtle shell. So when we got the plate carriers, I was happy to have that. However, I still didn't think it was that great, because I had seen people get aftermarket plate carriers that looked a little bit more comfortable, a little bit more maneuverable. But coming into the Army, where we have the IOTV, this big thing right here, it's super bulky, it's very hot, you can't move. It's kind of like a turtle shell with extra padding to the point where you really can't move around. It's heavy, you can't really operate your kit or your weapon as freely if you had, you know, an actual plate carrier. And a lot of units have an issue with this, with people going out and purchasing their own plate carriers, even if it matches the camouflage and whatnot. The commanders tend to have an issue with it because there's a safety thing. They think that if a soldier is buying this and they're new and they're not used to buying equipment, that they might buy something that, you know, might cause the mission to be a failure. Now, that is true in some regards. There are, you know, privates and whatnot who don't know what to buy. However, if you have more selection and you have the option, people get really passionate about their gear. You have a bunch of nicknames for people who have, you know, their own personal gear, like Geardos, and, you know, something a little bit worse that I'm not going to say on this video. But there's a stigma associated with people purchasing their own kit because they feel like you really shouldn't invest in the job if the military's not going to pay you, you know, to do something like that. But you should be investing in your occupation, especially something as serious as war fighting. So being able to have your own personal plate carriers to, you know, move your kit around and move a little bit better, operate a little bit better, and just function as a better fighter in general, that should definitely be an option. And in some units it is, but most units that I've seen, it's a big no-no. It's very taboo for you to purchase your own plate carrier and use that. And the next thing, which I really don't understand why the military hasn't gotten here just yet, is high-cut helmets. Now, obviously with high-cut helmets, if you're not familiar with them, it sort of has a cut that allows you to wear electronic hearing protection. But with high-cut helmets, they're much lighter. They tend to be more modular because they usually have like rail systems that you can utilize to have like a flashlight, you know, a camera or what have you, or even bungee cords that allow you to strap it to your night vision. So if your night vision ever comes undone, it'll just, you know, hang from the bungee cord, as opposed to having all this 550 cord or paracord and tying it to your night vision device and then tying it to your helmet. It just looks very sloppy. So it looks much more professional to have that helmet set up. It's more modular. It allows you to put more on it. It's lighter, it's more comfortable, and it allows you to have another thing that's next on this list is electronic hearing protection. Now, people really overlook this, but if you ever use, you know, Peltors or electronic hearing protection, you know how invaluable they can be on the battlefield. Because one, you can communicate better. When you get to the point where you can just communicate through your headset, it's so much easier because now you're not exerting energy trying to scream at someone, just for them to hear you.
Go. Hey, right side! Shoot right! Those are our guys on the left!
And when you have people screaming at you and you're trying to figure out what's going on, because you're trying to like read their lips at that point because you've been firing your weapon and you can't hear anything because your foam or your earplugs fell out, which happens a lot. Or when you go on patrol, you don't even have ear protection like that in because you don't have time to worry about that stuff. But when someone's yelling at you and you're trying to read lips, it just makes everything take so much longer. But when you can have it strapped up to your communications, it's so much easier. It's so much easier to understand. It's much quicker to pass orders. If everyone has it, everyone is dialed in to what's going on. And when you're in combat, there's something called auditory exclusion, which not even talking about the ringing in your ears when you fire your weapon, but when all your senses are focused on surviving, your hearing tends to get dulled because it's not as important, because your brain is putting more energy towards reflexes, eyesight, muscle fatigue and whatnot. It's putting all the energy towards that, and your hearing kind of just goes away. So when you have a headset where you can hear someone talking into your headset, it sort of brings you back into the hive mind of everything that's going on around you. It allows you to stay up to date and really dialed in on the bigger picture. And plus, if you're going in an operation where you need stealth, it's much easier to just talk into your headset as opposed to grabbing a mic, moving everything around, talking into it, having a speaker on that mic. So everything is just much more quiet when you have a headset, and you can just do that, and you can just have like a button wherever you want it to actually key in that mic, as opposed to having like one of those trucker mics where you're talking into that, or just not having that at all, where you're like yelling into your radio. It's much easier to communicate. So communications wise, hearing wise, it's way better. And you can't really utilize that as well when you have like this normal ECH, ACH setup with actual, covers over the ears. Now, another thing that I'm very passionate about is flashbangs. So people think flashbangs are really cool, especially if you play Call of Duty or what have you, Battlefield. It's cool to throw a flashbang in, and it's like a huge explosion or what have you. All of a sudden your vision's all white. It's not necessarily like that. It's a little bit dramatized in video games, but when you're doing close quarter battle, it increases your survivability so much to the point where if you're not using flashbangs, it's like it's very, very sketchy to go into a room without a flashbang. The flashbang increases survivability, and at the same time it avoids collateral damage. It's easy to hold. Everyone can have one or two. If everyone has one, everyone's going to feel much safer going into an enclosure. Now, something else when we're talking about close quarter battle and feeling safe is simunition. Now, if you're not familiar with simunition, there's a bunch of different names for it, but it's basically paintball that you can use with your actual weapons. Now, you might have to change out the barrel or the receiver slightly, but it's something you can load into your magazine and fire through your actual weapon system using your same optics. So it's not like airsoft, it's not like paintball where you're using fake weapons. It allows you to really get used to your setup for the most part. And when you're using simunition, you can feel it, so if you're getting hit, and it forces you to be more careful, and it forces you to be more responsive to certain threats. Now, when you're going around doing blanks, it's kind of just like, it's more fun than anything. It's not really that stressful. But if you get like shot in the neck or the hand, it's going to, snap you out of the thing that you've built up saying, I'm totally safe, it's just training. So it really keeps you into the battle, keeps you focused. And for room clearing, it's like totally invaluable, because when you're going into a room and you're trying to build trust within that stack or that team, and you have someone who's the one man who starts getting rounds or starts getting fired at, and they start getting hit, and all of a sudden they start backing out of the room, then it really allows you to see who those individuals are that you need to work on, to build trust and confidence that you're going to come in after them and, neutralize that threat. So it allows you to really get in a more realistic mindset about how your body is going to react when the bad guys are actually shooting at you and projectiles are actually coming towards you. Now the next thing is going to be like a no-brainer, especially if you were reconnaissance at any point, or you're with a sniper team. But having a thermal optic, whether it be like a handheld or actually something you have on your weapon, is really, really a game changer on the battlefield. For reconnaissance, if you're planning and you know that you only have night vision and the bad guys have thermal, it's going to take a lot to work around that. It's going to be much sketchier going into a fight knowing that the enemy has thermals, especially if you're trying to do like a nighttime raid where they can see you coming from, potentially a mile away, depending on the terrain. It's going to really test your planning skills to get around that. But being on the other side, if you can use thermals for counter reconnaissance and just spotting people for security, it enables your security to be so much more stronger because you can see these threats when they're far away. It allows you to really turn like a sound or something that you think might be an enemy and see it because you have thermal, you have that heat signature. So it eliminates that doubt, and it allows you to observe and identify those threats when they're far away, and allows you to react more effectively because you have more reactionary time. And this is something that I've done some advanced training, but something that I didn't even consider when you're in CQB. If you're in a really tight enclosure and there's guns going off or flashbangs going off and there's a bunch of smoke, if you have a thermal optic, it really allows you to put the enemy in their place, because now if there's a smoky hallway, you can use your thermal optic. You can see at the end of the hallway. If you're going into a room, if you really can't see anything, you can just pick up your thermal optic real quick, and it allows you to see if there's a threat in there or not. So for CQB, a lot of people don't necessarily attribute thermal for being helpful with CQB stuff, but it definitely can be. Now with the normal battlefield, if there is smoke, obviously thermal will help you. Now there are a few times or environments where thermals aren't that helpful, especially when there's like sunrise or sunset and it's kind of just like iffy. But especially at night, thermals really are a game changer on the battlefield. And I can tell you, trying to plan around someone who has thermal optics is just a pain in the butt when you don't have them yourself. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to talk about is sort of like a wild card, and a lot of people will probably have their own opinions and will probably disagree with me, but I feel like bullpup rifles, which if you're not familiar with the bullpup, it means the magazine is behind the trigger assembly. But I feel bullpup rifles really do get way more flack than they deserve, because with a bullpup rifle you can have a much shorter barrel in the same size rifle, or you can shorten the rifle and have the same barrel length as like an M4. So if you have an M4 with like a 16-inch barrel, or you have like a Tavor, which is a bullpup rifle with a 16-inch barrel, you can get it much shorter, which means it's much better for maneuverability. It's much better for CQB. If you're in the Royal Marines or the British Army or the Israeli Defense Forces and you have a bullpup weapon, you might know what I'm talking about, where I will say it's super annoying to go hands-free with an M4 or M16 and your weapon is slung on your back, as opposed to having a bullpup slung on your back, because you can normally get it a lot tighter depending on where the sling mounts are. So you can go hands-free a lot better. If you're just trying to keep your weapon wherever you want, it's much easier because it's a shorter package that you have to worry about. It's better for CQB, and it can still have the same precision as a rifle that is a little bit longer, like an M4, because it has the same barrel length. So people don't really like bullpups because they usually have bad triggers, or they might be a little bit weird. The weight distribution might feel a little bit weird. But if you can really train on a bullpup and get very proficient with it, it'll feel so much better. And especially in an environment where urban warfare is probably going to be a big thing, room clearing is so much better when you have a bullpup. It's so much easier to have a weapon that's right here and you can just bring up. you can just bring it around a door frame super easily, as opposed to having like an M4 where you're all the way out here. It just keeps everything close and more controllable in my opinion. But again, that's sort of a wild card, so feel free to disagree with me. But if you guys have any other ideas about what you think the infantry should deserve, or something that people overlook with infantry, feel free to comment. I definitely love to see what you guys think. This is the list that I sort of just came up with. I didn't really have a number. Like, I wasn't gonna try and say 10 things the infantry should have more of, because then I'm just gonna be reaching for ideas. But if there's something I overlooked and there's something that you guys definitely think the infantry deserves more of, then definitely let me know. But a little bit of a different video, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you'd like more videos like this where I just give my opinion based off of, you know, what I think the military should be like, or, you know, some changes the military should go through, feel free to let me know. If you have your own recommendations, I'm open to hear those too, because I'm sure y'all have had different experiences than I have. So it's just the nature of the beast. It's nice to have all these opinions come in so we can sort of see where the common ground actually lays. But I hope you all enjoyed the video. I'll try and keep these coming intermittently with reaction videos. But thanks for sticking around. Thanks for liking and subscribing and commenting. I'll see y'all in the next video.